Calling from a 971 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi. Glad I got through. You can call me Charlie. I use he, they pronouns. And I was calling in to talk about a pretty fun topic. Sarcasm there. But I was going to talk about gun control policy, and school shootings, and a kind of critique from the left of methods of reducing school shootings.
Okay. And Charlie, where are you calling from? Just, if you feel more comfortable giving a general area.
Yeah. I'm calling out from the Northeast.
Okay. Okay. So go ahead.
Yeah. So I'm going to give like a couple quick demographic things to kind of help illuminate this. I've been super invested in politics for basically my entire life. And up until around age of 18, I was kind of one of those people who was like, we should just round up and get rid of all the guns. Kind of just like get rid of every gun except for people who need it for like hunting for survival kind of deal. And then I learned a little bit more about guns. I'm still on the left, but I learned a little bit more about guns and kind of realized that most of our liberal politicians are completely incompetent in combating this problem because they don't know how to properly address this issue, and also kind of came to distrust the federal government and its capacity to address this issue. So I still want to combat school shootings, obviously, and gun violence in general, gun suicides in general. So I'm not like one of those Republicans who's just like kind of hand-waving it away. I think it's a serious issue.
Well, can you be more specific about what you think is the failure and what it is specifically that you want to do?
Well, I think a lot of like various gun control policies, like magazine sizes or things of that nature, are kind of flawed because they don't really understand how guns work. And in particular, Bill, the focus is on the AR-15 when it's not actually that unique of a gun. It's a pretty standard semi-automatic. So it's not about. I just think we're not doing a particular good way to.
Well, be more specific. Like, what is it that you think should be passed, for instance?
Because, can I just jump in here? I come from a family that owns a lot of guns, and like the magazine capacity, that is something that is regulated just within a sort of game and fish capacity, where you don't want a gunman to be able to fire, like, say, 16 shotgun shells immediately. So you have a limit of like 3 or some, for instance, depending on game maybe. I think those restrictions are perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, I think there was a comment somewhere in there about things I would propose. I do think that there are some effective policies. Like, I think you could really cut down on the number of mass shooting incidences by passing laws that remove the guns from the hands of anybody with a domestic violence record or abusing animals. That's a pretty high kind of Venn diagram way of hitting the mass shooting incidences. So I think less so regulating the types of guns, but specifically that, and then closing some of the loopholes that happen at gun shows.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think people are trying to close the gun show loopholes. Didn't the Biden administration actually sort of like try and do some of that from an executive action? I mean, these aren't mutually exclusive measures that you're talking about anyways, are you?
They're not mutually exclusive, but I do think that there's kind of a particular focus on eliminating the big scary guns rather than kind of more pragmatic solutions. And I feel like what I generally hear from liberals in my everyday life and also from politicians, the methods that they kind of expound to solve the situation are not particularly realistic, either from an electoral perspective, that even presumes that popular support for something leads to it happening. You're very much aware that how popular something is has no correlation to whether a law gets passed. Additionally, we have the Supreme Court the way it is, and then even the implementation of the law would be problematic due to the number of guns out there and also the the statistical chance of non-compliance, where even if 1/1000th of people don't comply, we might lack the resources to even get all the guns.
From early April, Biden administration moved one step closer to enacting a rule requiring people who sell firearms online and at gun shows to conduct background checks on their potential customers. The finalized rule aims to close what gun control advocates call the gun show loophole by increasing requirements to obtain federal firearms license, by more specifically defining what it means to be engaged in the business of selling firearms. So we're doing that, I guess, just on the sort of more regulatory side. How would you inhibit guns getting into the hands of people easily when they are when they're used to commit suicide?
Well, I must admit that my particular political ideology is much more a bottom-up source of social change. Like, I believe the analogy I kind of use is that policy is like the moon, and the bottom-up social transformations in our modes of being and interpersonal relationships are like the sun. The moon does not have a luminosity of its own, but it's rather reflective of the societal transformations we interact with. So, I mean, my programmatic approach is massive changes to our interpersonal connections, our community arrangements, our economic structure, et cetera, which I think would address the issues of...
Yeah, but nothing. I mean, that's all. I mean, that's fine. It would be better if we had a better society and one with more connectedness, and we didn't have folks feeling the isolation and having the suicidal ideation. I would totally agree with you. I just don't know why these ideas are mutually exclusive, A. B, when it comes to suicides, I mean, just as a sheer math question, if you limit people's access to guns and you slow the, and you create more friction in the process of obtaining guns, you will diminish the number of suicides. I mean, that's just simply, we know that shooting oneself is the most efficient way to kill yourself. And we know that in a significant percentage of situations where people have suicidal ideation and some time passes, that statistically speaking, the suicidal ideation diminishes on like a per person basis, not necessarily within a person, but just, I don't know if you were talking about, you could, if you extended the wait time for guns, nationally by 3 weeks, whether you would cut down on suicides by 5% or 10% or 2% or 1%. But I mean, none of what you're talking about. I mean, I am all for having a society that is less isolating and there being more mutual support. But these are not mutually exclusive ideas.
I totally agree, and I generally support a diversity of tactics, such that I fully support people approaching this issue from that direction. But this might sound like a bit of a pivot, but you're a little bit older than me, and you're aware of the term "going postal," and that refers to the general statistical disproportionate of violence that was committed at post offices in workplace shootings. And we don't particularly see that phenomena emerging anymore. So I actually don't have a motivated question for why this is, but what do you think led to that cultural change where the primary form of workplace violence is no longer at the post office?
Well, I mean, maybe maybe there were reforms at the post office. I mean, I don't know.
Wait, wasn't going postal, like there were shootings elsewhere then besides just post
yes,
offices?
but in the 80s, I feel like there was a rash of situations in the post office. But certainly, since then there have been other ones. I'm not sure I fully understand like why why are mass shooting events less likely now to happen at the workplace than they are other places? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, my general question is,
I think the nature, if I had to guess, I would say that there's probably still those situations where you have shootings like that, at workplaces, but now it's been supplanted by shootings that are more about volume than going after a specific person at work who was causing you problems. I mean, I don't, this is complete speculation on my part.
Serial killing fell too.
I haven't paid that much attention to that dynamic, but that would be my guess.
My general thing that I'm hoping to illustrate by that is that a lot of the manifestations of these kind of mass shooting incidents are, let's say, cultural and mimetic in nature, whereby the social alienation characteristic is somewhat taking the form of it's when a certain amount of stress is placed on a person and then they lash out in an incredibly violent way. They're taking the form that is most present in their mind. So it's a bit of like it's kind of like how memes operate, I would say. So I feel like even if we were to get rid of guns, we would still have these kind of, I would admit that we would.
Oh, there's no doubt. Listen, I agree. And I would say, look, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think we got to move on a little bit. But all I can say is, one, a lot of people are IMing saying, the reason why you had those shootings in the post offices in the 80s is that the post office hired a lot of Vietnam veterans. And I think, after that, it becomes a little bit obvious why that cohort would have the people that you're talking about would, the idea of going in with a gun into the workplace might be a little bit more forefront in their mind. But yeah, I agree with you. But these are not mutually exclusive propositions. You need to deal with the stresses and all of the psychological problems that will drive someone to go and do something like this. But there's no doubt that making it harder to execute these things are going to save lives. I mean, it's just no doubt, and what can be done at this point is limited by the Supreme Court, frankly, and which is why you get stuff like magazine, trying to regulate the amount of ammunition or the capacity of these guns. But I mean, I'm not. I don't know who could be against the idea of making our society more interdependent. Well, I know a lot of people who would have a problem with that, but making our society more interdependent, having people less isolated, creating more third spaces, building the sense of community, reducing stresses. I mean, all of those things, yes, but they're not mutually exclusive. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I do appreciate the call.
I do also have one quick remark that I also do think a generalized anti-gun sentiment on the left is going to screw us over in some fashion, especially in combating fascism, whereby I think that the liberals and the left are generally setting themselves up to be completely disarmed in the face of a heavily armed right wing. And that, either way this election goes, we're going to have to deal with a lot of stochastic terrorism.
I really, I understand what you're saying, but I got to say, I do not think the solution to fighting fascism is going to be having a full-on armed conflict in the streets.
I'm not saying full-on armed conflict. I'm more so saying that if you look at even labor strikes in pre-Civil War Spain, anytime labor organizing reaches sufficient ends, the corporations start hiring thugs to shoot at.
No, I get that, but I'm saying that deploying our own shooters to shoot back, I just don't think is going to be the effective way of winning that situation. But I appreciate the call.
Okay, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks. I mean, look, get a crossbow.
To me, it's always like we don't need I don't know why people defend specific AR-15. That's a red flag to me too, because I think AR-15 is stand-in for all sorts of types of guns that don't need to be allowed to be produced, that we suffer to be produced and sold, and we shouldn't do it. I agree that gun control can be carceral, especially in our political system, and we do need to worry about that. And I am very concerned about locking certain people up because of guns. But as far as the production stuff, we need way more authoritarian control over the producers of these armaments.
New dad, the left was armed in interwar Spain and Germany, and they lost. I just don't think I get the idea that they've got a lot more guns than we do. But you know what? I don't think that they're going to use them in the way that we think.
It's going to be who has state power.
Always. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.